This podcast is sponsored by Apple. Think different and go buy your Apple products now.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of History's Mysteries. For those of you who are new, my name's Alessia, and with me is my co-host, Lily.
Hi everyone.
On today's episode, we'll be discussing the assassination of John F. Kennedy. But first, who was JFK? He was the 35th President of the United States, in term from 1961 to 1963. JFK was the youngest man to be elected to office and the youngest president to die when he was shot in Dallas, Texas on November 22, 1963. JFK was born on May 28, 1917, in Brookline, Massachusetts, as the second child in a family of 9 children. He went to Massachusetts Elementary School, a private school his mom taught at.
Okay, so let's talk about the day of his assassination. As Leslie said before, JFK was assassinated on November 22, 1963. He was killed while he was in his motorcade in downtown Dallas, Texas. Shots were fired and hit him in the head and the neck, and he was pronounced dead at the hospital shortly after. After the assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested for the murder. As Oswald was being taken to jail the next day, he was killed by Jack Ruby and was pronounced dead 2 hours after that.
Before we continue, don't forget to fuel up with booster juice to love life again. What some of you may not know is that there are tons of conspiracy theories surrounding John F. Kennedy and his assassination, which we're going to talk about.
The first conspiracy theory we are going to talk about is that the CIA did it. Now, the main issue with this conspiracy theory is that there's no actual way to prove it because the former head of the CIA was at the head of this investigation.
Oh, okay, so there's like a huge conflict of interest going on there.
Yeah, exactly. So, JFK found out that the CIA was planning on killing the Cuban leader Castro, and this part has been proven to be true. Now, the theory begins because people believed that the CIA was worried that Kennedy would disband them, and they were unhappy with the fact that Kennedy was not invading Cuba. So they decided that they would order the assassination of Kennedy.
So how exactly are the CIA and Oswald connected?
Great question. So there's proof that Oswald was in Mexico City in the Russian embassy and that he was also a supporter of the Cuban leader. People believe that the CIA was aware of this and that they are also aware of what was said at the Russian embassy with Oswald. And then a few weeks later, Oswald shot Kennedy. Now, the reason that this doesn't really make much sense is that if he was a supporter of the Cuban leader, why would he have killed Kennedy if Kennedy also supported the Cuban leader?
And something else that I don't quite understand is there's another theory going on that the Cuban leader hired Oswald to assassinate Kennedy, but if Kennedy was in support of the Cuban leader and it was the CIA that wasn't, why was Oswald hired to do that?
Exactly. People believe that Oswald wanted to show his support to the Cuban government, and that's why he ended up killing Kennedy. But there's no facts that say that Kennedy didn't like Castro.
And that wouldn't really be supporting the Cuban government if Kennedy liked Castro, because then you just kind of be ruining one of their connections with the U.S., or their main connection.
Exactly.
There's a multiple shooters conspiracy theory. And basically what it is in 1979, the House Select Committee on Assassinations released a report stating that there was a high probability that there were 2 gunmen that fired at JFK. A recording of the gunshot that killed JFK was recorded on a police officer's radio, which not really become important until later. The officer had left on his radio at the time and was stationed in Dealey Plaza. The recording was filled with static that scientists were hired to identify the gunshots. From the recording, they could hear 4 shots, but Lee Harvey Oswald only made 3.
Now, that's an interesting theory, but it was actually disproved on the 50th anniversary of JFK's murder in 2013. A man named Larry Sabato had the recording reanalyzed with much better technology and states that they did not pick up the gunshots. What they did capture is an idling motorcycle and the rattling of a microphone. The officer that was recording was also 2 miles away from the JFK assassination, so it would be impossible for him to pick up any gunshots on the radio.
It's just crazy to me how out of hand these theories can get. This last theory was disproven so easily, and so how do we know which ones are true, which ones are false? or which ones are like in between.
It also took them so many years to disprove this one when all they had to do was look back at the radio.
Mm-hmm. Like the fact that so many of these theories could just be easily disproven and they're just like snowballing out of control.
And the question is, why is no one taking the time to look at them? Like, yes, this did happen 50 years ago, or 50 plus years ago now, but it's still everyone's like question of what actually happened. So why is the end result still right now that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone? Why, with these so many theories, is that like not even being looked into very closely?
Each theory that we look into states that no one thinks that he acted alone, but they end up randomly concluding that it was Lee Harvey Oswald acting alone with no one else helping him with these thoughts and ideas and even just helping him out.
And that does bring us back to the point, is the CIA behind it? Because the CIA is the one who is conducting these investigations. They're the ones who's making the final calls. So are they still behind it and still trying to cover it up now, 60 years later, and just making sure that as people still get more interested, because more and more documents get released every like couple years about the JFK assassination. So more and more documents keep getting released, giving more information to the people about the assassination. So how come lawsuits and trials keep getting shut down?
It really is true. Like when people, it goes back to the saying when people are like, the victors write history. Like if it truly is this whole conspiracy within the CIA, they're writing their own story. They're choosing what comes out and what goes in. Like they get to choose how we find out, what we find out, and when we find it out. Like they really are pulling all the strings.
Yeah, so how we really have to end is there's no way that we're really going to know what's going to happen, but especially if the CIA is behind it, there will never be the correct answer. Everyone will always have their theories, but because so much has been lost or just so many made-up things have come and like interfered with what people have thought about it, the conspiracy theories are most likely never going to end, and it's just always going to be a question who assassinated JFK.